Awesome, guys. I am very, very excited for this episode today. I feel like this episode is needed, especially in 2025, as we have a lot of different people who may feel that they're missing this concept of love. And I think I have the one and only to be able to talk about this with us today. So, with that being said, Moshe, thank you so much for being on this show. And I look forward to hearing about your philosophies and how you're helping other people adopt this concept of love, not just their business, but their overall life as well.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm really glad to be here with you, Jay.
Now, it's interesting. I know from your background, you done with philosophy or psychology, and you also are in like the health space as well too. Now, before we dive into your background, I want to start this off with some little controversial rapid fire questions of love or war. Okay,
Yeah,
you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so now I'm gonna create basically like a business scenario. So I'm gonna throw out business scenarios, and you tell me whether the Amari way or a more of a competitive approach would win and why. And you can probably say win or which one would be a little bit more suited for the situation. So with that being said, a startup trying to raise VC funding, love or war?
Definitely love.
Definitely love. Okay, awesome. Why?
Well, love will probably be my answer to most of these. And I see it as a both and, where love does not
Hmm.
mean ignore competition. Love does not mean just hug a tree and be naive and hope everything happens. To me, love is an energy that we bring to it, an uplifting, connecting energy. And who doesn't want to support that? Who doesn't want the founders they fund to bring that kind of energy?
That's correct. Okay, awesome. I like that. Now, negotiating at high stake deals.
That's a tough one for people to implement love. And I think love will win every time because it includes respect. It's like a good diplomat knows how to find common ground, respect the other person, even if they disagree, have the hard conversations without needing to crush or destroy them, which in my view does nobody good. It's kind of like the difference between being assertive. I'm going to step up and stand my ground and say what's true, and being aggressive, which is putting someone down in order to lift myself up. So the love powered leadership is assertive, not aggressive.
Awesome. Okay. Now, leading a sales team that's under pressure.
Yeah, well, this is where the war-like mentality shows up big time. Like, we'll do anything we need to hit our numbers. And I've worked with a lot of companies, particularly in the health and technology space, where the pressure is so relentless that sales reps will do anything to hit their numbers. And it hurts them because they make big sacrifices this quarter, and then next quarter they're kind of screwed. Well, unless they bring the numbers down again. So the
Yeah.
warlike mentality can come out ahead in the very short term and the long run.
Okay. Awesome. Two more questions. Competing against an aggressive rival.
Interesting. Good question.
I had to keep you on your toes. I want
I
a
like,
little bit.
I like that. I like that. Still love, because otherwise it's who has more soldiers, who has bigger guns, and it'll just keep escalating. And we see that in our world in a lot of places right now. And it doesn't end. In fact, there's one statistic I learned when I was writing my book a few years ago, that there hasn't been a day without war, not one day in the history in our modern day history of several thousand years. How mind blowing is that? So our higher brains have the capacity for to bring love to come from up here instead of the more reptilian older brain that's all about survival. Most of us are not being chased by tigers,
No.
and so we don't need that kind of response. The reason it's difficult is if our competitor brings that, they might do anything to take us down. So we need to be clear about what's going on and defend ourselves, but we don't need to stoop to that level.
Okay, that makes sense.
Michelle Obama talked about that, about how high can we stay, not
Yeah.
how low can we go. Yeah,
Oh, I like that. And I did not know that statistic. That's pretty crazy when you look
it
at it.
is.
It is that is wow. But I also I'm curious, which could be a whole different kind of question or conversation, is that to a degree purposeful or like intentional to have that continuous war from like the overall different nations? Is that something that's happening behind the scenes on purpose with intentionality, and maybe they're fearful of what if we decide to just actually choose love, what does that look like, and what does that now affect in like the economy and different like situations? I don't know. I'm not that big into politics or like social economics, but I'm curious now that you mention it. I'm like, why have we been in war for forever in some form or fashion? It's just interesting.
Well, I think you answered the question, Jay, and what you just said in one word in particular, the F word,
Yeah,
which was fear. And historically, ever since we've been settled and doing agriculture, that allowed for greed because we had surplus. And if I have my surplus and I can charge them more for it, and that creates that cycle that's been around for quite a long time. So I think at the root of it is fear of not having enough,
which
that
is
it's either me or them, and it's unnecessary. And we have a lot of evidence to show what happens when we adopt a love-based mindset. It's more profitable and makes people happier and more fulfilled. And it's tough in this culture. And that's why that's the stand I choose to take. And so it's harder in today's world to bring a love-based mindset. And I think the alternative is fear. And we see a lot of that and how powerful fear can be as a motivator. John Lennon of the Beatles said, there's two main forces in life, fear and love. And we get to choose every day. We get to
correct.
choose.
That's fair. Last question of this rapid fire questioning is in a business scenario, a CEO that's trying to turn around a failing company. Are we going love or war?
Again, love. Now, the reality is war can be motivating. War is one way to bring people together.
Correct.
The reason is it's a common theme and there's a sense of urgency. We can do that same thing with love.
Yeah, that makes sense. And okay, so with that being said, we're gonna pull the onion back or the curtain back a little bit. And I would love to understand, how do we get to this point of starting to focus in on love? Now I know you went to school again for psychology. And you have a fascinating background from being a consultant. Now you're an author, and I believe you have a second book as well that's coming out soon. Is that correct? So, from being in psychology, public health, consulting multiple companies, well-established companies, how did you get to where you are? Like, what inspired this whole movement for yourself?
Well, there were three things and they converged nicely. One of them was working with doing management and marketing strategy consulting, business innovation. That's a space my firm, ResearchWorks, was in for about 30 years. And it occurred to me that business is missing love. And that came through the work we were doing. One example that really hit home was working with this was a medical technology company, working with them. And they did well, they made money, but they were always battling. They were battling with various of their stakeholders of whose territory is this, who owns this piece, and so on. And again, they made money, which was their blessing and their curse. And at one point, a senior project manager, a really smart guy, said, "We hate our customers." And it was really striking to hear that language. And he wasn't a drama guy. It
Yeah,
was
I
true,
was
and
like,
it
was that
showed up.
theatrics or he
No,
meant?
it was
Okay.
real. It was not theatrics. It was accurate. And I could see it working with him as a consultant. And it was really deeply embedded. So it was hard to, he had the courage to step back and the willingness to see it. But it was hard for others who were deep in the milieu to be able to do that. And part of our work was to try to shine a light on that. Like, this is how you're being. Is this how you want to be? And that led me to focus more in what I now do a lot of is executive education coaching, that it's more about who you are being than what you are doing. It's not one or the other, but it starts with being, and that shapes the doing. And that results in the having. Be, do, have. That's
The classic right there. And that makes so much sense. Like, from looking at these organizations, I actually had a conversation with this on the podcast that I was on in Vegas. Is when you look at an organization is just people, like it is an organism. at the end of the day. So it's like if this company is lacking this concept of love, I'm curious, is like, is it because the individuals themselves as a human being is missing the concept of love? So it's hard to even translate that over to now this bigger organization because it's not coming from the source itself, which is the person, the people.
Yeah. That's a beautiful insight, Jermaine. And there's a chapter in my book, The Amari Wave, and it's called if your business is missing love, are you missing love? And what you said was right on, because as human beings, we can't really give what we don't have. If I don't love myself, if I don't love people around me, how can I give that to coworkers, to customers in a genuine, authentic, and enduring way? I can't. It's like taking from an empty bucket.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
just,
with
yeah.
that being said, right, because you're dealing with companies who might be dealing with a lot of um, high risk or, very aggressive markets. Like, have you felt some of the resistance when you're talking to some of these companies and some of these leaders, and like they're resisting this concept and are skeptical of including this, concept of love into their business, whether it's like a traditional business or something that's a little bit more, or is it more they're just need better clarity and understanding of specifically what it is?
Yes. Well, for some, it scares the shit out of them. And they won't say this scares me, but it'll be more like
Yeah, you
this,
can read the body language.
yeah, tough guy kind of thing. We've always done it this way, and business is cutthroat and so on. And just to circle back to what you asked earlier, what led me here. So one was that we hate our customers, and that the culture of business that supports that. A second one is the language of business,
Hmm.
where we talk about crushing our competition, capturing market share, where we think of customers as things we own and we control. And it's very demeaning to, like, who wants to be controlled by the company that they give money to? Doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense, but that's the model. So we've adopted and normalized this predatory and actually violent language in business. Okay, what's your battle plan? We're going to war against XYZ. That's not uncommon, but
Right.
that feeds this model and makes it seem normal. And
Hmm.
that's what some people who reject out of hand this idea of love powered leadership in business that's driven by love. It's tied into that more warlike model. It's tied into what the economist Milton Friedman popularized 50, 60 years ago about it's all about the shareholder first. Everything goes to improve the results for shareholders. And shareholders are important.
Yes.
In my mind, they don't come first. Their success is a byproduct of putting love to work, making customers happy, keeping employees fulfilled, and so on.
Correct.
So we
Yeah.
get there, but that's not the reason. And similarly, it's my belief and experience that no company has ever been created with a purpose of making money.
No, it always comes through some form of problem. What I've seen, and I could be wrong, is figuring out a problem that they were trying to solve for themselves and or
Yes.
that they wanted solved, but nobody was doing it. So
Yes.
it wasn't even the money was the byproduct. And it's like, yes, of course, when you build a business or you have a solution, it's gonna like you're gonna want to be compensated, but it came from solving a problem, whether it was yours or whether it was somebody else's. Now, with that being said, I'm curious because I'm curious to understand like how I know you saw an opportunity in that moment where the person was like, hey, I hate my customers. But some people can't even identify what even love is, right? I want to how do you define love, right?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. There's a lot of people, the word means so many things. When I
Yeah.
was a kid, my parents used to go for summer walks and sing this song, Love is a many splendored thing. There's a lot of aspects to love. And I wanted to be rigorous about defining it. To me, love is simply energy that uplifts and connects. And the best example I have is when I walk into Trader Joe's, a mid-sized grocery chain that has fanatically loyal customers, I feel a little bit uplifted. Yeah, it feels good to be here. I
Yeah.
like being here. And I feel connected. Yeah, it's my kind of place. When I walk into other supermarket chains, it's not bad, but it tends to be neutral.
Hmm.
It's not uplifting. It's not depressing or diminishing. It's just
But
transactional.
correct.
And to me, life is way too short for that. And who doesn't want to give money to companies that uplift them, make them feel better, rather than ones where it's just emotionally flat?
Hmm.
And so the world I imagine, where there's this wave of Amari companies, whatever they call it, they don't have to use the word love, whatever they call it, is imagine as a customer, let's say you're dealing with 20 companies today, and 15 of them, 16 of them are Amari companies, and you have this uplift, this
Hmm.
connection, So you have these jolts of feeling good as a
Right.
human being. Like how could that not change the world significantly? Instead of having 15 or 20 neutral, soul-sucking interactions.
No, that's so true. And I mean, if we're being honest, question, do you think most business leaders actually care about this concept of love? Or is it literally just the results that they're looking for? Because what comes to mind from what you just said, I'm thinking about when people go to war, the leader has to be able to instill this competitiveness in order to prepare like their comrades, their soldiers, but then their soldiers create this foundation between one another, this camaraderie, which is like love to be able to support. So it's like, hey, maybe it is like this leader has to be this war person because they have to help instill that kind of mindset for what's to come. But with that being said, with the individuals, the soldiers, they now are supported foundationally of this concept of love to then make sure they actually get the war aspect completed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's making sense, but
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful example, and how powerful it is in the context of literally of war to say that love is what unifies people. And so the question is, we talk about the leader bring the sense of competitiveness. To me, it's a sense of purpose
mm,
fundamentally. And yes, there's an aspect of competition. And when I work with different companies, it's very straightforward about that. Yeah, you're competing. And to that point, I've not had one executive I've worked with who started with, I want to be more loving. That's not there's always a need or a problem or a challenge that presents. Like, I can't get my leadership team on board, or our vision, we just can't align with our vision, or our sales keep dropping, our customers don't value all the good we do. Whatever, there's a presenting issue that can be dealt with in the context of love. So it's not how people present, and it shows up. And this stuff isn't, while it could serve everybody, not everybody's ready for this.
yeah, that was going to, in my mind, I was thinking, right? You probably read the book Ready, Fire, Aim. And it's like for each, depending on where you're at and each level of your business, there's different needs. So my question is it the same thing with the concept of love or having a competitive like inspiration or a competitive drive? Depending on where you at in your business, it might make more sense to have necessarily not have one than the other, but one is a little bit more of the driving force based on what a person is in their business journey. Like in the beginning stages, it's like, hey, we really need to be competitive because we need to escape velocity. Once we've escaped velocity, okay, now we can actually incorporate more love so that we can sustain right where we're at. And then it's like a cycle. Is it like a back and forth, or is it more of a partnership that people have to find to unify both of these two to drive forward?
Yeah. It brings up an important point about the rhythm and the cycle
Yes.
of this. And I'd like to shift the perspective a little bit, like look at it
Okay.
a little bit sideways, to where it's not either or,
Hmm.
it's a both and.
Hmm.
At every moment, it's a both and. Like, for example, if I'm a leader and need to have a tough conversation with a VP under me, I need to have that. I need to take a stand and say, look, this isn't working. We need to make some changes. And I can do that. I can still stay connected and convey, I care about you. I want you to succeed. That's why we need to do this. So it's not take a stand and be so tough that there's no room for compassion. And it's not, well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to offend them. I really like them. It's not, it's both. It's, yeah, I need to take a firm stand and I can stay connected. And those are the skills that we work on in coaching, for example. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. My belief is love is the driving force from the beginning. And again, some people get stuck on the word love. That's why we
Right.
talked a while ago about people can call it grilled cheese
You're
or
gonna,
whatever they want.
yeah, having that definition clarified, it's like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Now, it's crazy because in my mind, I think of it as like dancing, like when you're partnering with, if you ever dance, hopefully you don't got two left feet, but whenever you partner with someone, you do have to lead them, but you lead gracefully, but you're also receptive to understanding like how they move and being
Yes.
okay with them being led. So it is this fluidity that you have where you're guiding and being guided at the same time, but that's because you're receptive to what the person is also giving, and you're not here to compete or like one oversteps the other, because then you end up stepping on each other's toes, you miss the rhythm, you miss the beat, the counts. At the end of the day, it's like, hey, we want to have this graceful dance between the two kind of concepts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And
Awesome.
that's a really nice analogy because it is a back and forth. And if you're not receptive, then there's not that fluid movement and it
Mhm.
shows. People
Yeah.
people pick that up. It reminds me years ago, Bill Gates cited Apple as the company that made Microsoft much better and respected them. Because of Apple, we are a much stronger company. They brought out our best.
I
So
like
that
that.
speaks to looking at competition. Like the dance isn't only within the company or with customers, it's if you look at the in an industry overall.
Mhm.
So Microsoft can say to Apple, we compete fiercely with you
Yeah.
and we want as much market share as we can, and we respect you. You
Mhm.
make us better. You bring out our best. So
I like
that
that.
makes that up. That's it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. That is good for everybody.
Yeah. I remember hearing a quote. It was basically saying like seek out a rival. Or maybe I think it was, I don't know if it was a quote or if it was someone I was just listening to, but that's what I'm hearing kind of between those two companies. They're seeking out this rival to compete, to push one another, but pushing one another purposefully in an uplifting way to where it's like, hey, we're gonna go back and forth with one another so that we can become better. So I think, hey, if you can find that, whether it's within yourself or within what you're doing, it gives you that combination of both.
Exactly. And I imagine you're an athlete. I've imagined you've experienced that in
Oh yeah.
sports and athletics where you might be competing fiercely with someone and you love them. They push you.
Oh yeah, all the time. Like, so I play online D line right tackle, and before the games, talking to the other team, it's like you're having a lot of trash talking, but it's also like, hey, make sure you do good, be safe, because you do care. But like, it's another person, it's another human being. We're gonna get physical. That's okay. We're gonna have a good game, but it's like, hey, do remember to take care of yourself. Like, let's make sure we both come off the field in one piece. But give me your best. Get like, don't hold out. Like, show me what you can do as well. So it is
Exactly.
having that endearing. Now, I know you have 8 different ways that people can catch this Amari wave. Help me understand what are those 8 steps and what's like some of the easiest ways that people can catch this wave.
All right. Here's one starting point that I found really useful, and that is, well, for skeptics, a starting point is let's say you're in Denver.
Okay.
Say, hey, how about the Broncos? Oh, I love the Broncos or the Avalanche or whatever team. And a lot of people, and I'm stereotyping somewhat toward male, emotionally closed off leaders. And it's not exclusive to them, but that's where this shows up more consistently. So it's having someone say, I love, and it's a company. I love the Broncos. I love In N Out Burger. I love my church. I love whatever it is. So they're acknowledging that love can exist in the context of a relationship between an individual and an organization. And most people can say get to something they love.
Correct.
And
And
then
is,
it's
go ahead.
wouldn't you want people to feel that way about your company? So that it builds a bridge. If people can recognize they feel love for an organization, doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit, if it's a for-profit, but something they relate to and feel strongly towards. And then wouldn't you want people to feel this way toward your company? And who wouldn't say yes to that? Yeah, of course I would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's true. I think there's a part, sorry to cut your wisdom. There's a part where I heard where you're having this, you're implementing this in one-on-one relationships, but then you're also implementing the same concept into like a mission, a vision for an organization. Is that correct? Where it's like you're utilizing it both. Okay, cool.
yeah. Yeah. It runs throughout, from one-on-one relationships through why the organization is here and where are they going and how are they
Mhm.
going to get there.
Okay.
It runs, yeah, it runs through everything. Another way, to that point, another way is to look at an organization's mission and their vision. And is it clear and is it compelling? Do people care about it?
Hmm.
And can they see themselves in it? That's the connection aspect. Love is energy that uplifts and connects. Do they feel uplifted? Do they feel a sense of connection? So that's another way to build it in. A
Yeah.
third, a third way to bring the idea of love, or what I call Amari, that's Latin for love, into the conversation is to simply ask, okay, team, gather around, got two questions. Do we love our customers? And usually there'll be a quick answer, like there'll be a, yeah, we do. And then the second question is, did they love us back?
Mhm.
So a lot of companies are, well, we do this and we have policies. And some say, yeah, we're all in with that. And usually they reap the benefits. And some, like, for example, Trader Joe's, they sell 4 to 6 times more per square foot than most grocery chains. It's extraordinary. That's how this stuff works.
That's so it's interesting because there's a couple things and I want to break that down. You have the person or the organization that's saying, this is what we love, but then there's a disconnect potentially. And it's like, do you really love this? Or are you just saying you love this because maybe it looks good to say that you love this? Have you found that people have that disconnect or like that lack of clarity? It's like, hey, you don't really love this. You love a variation of this. So let's pivot it a little bit so that you can actually embody the concept of love for this thing, which then now other people can see this is true.
Yeah. So that disconnect shows up
Okay.
for sure. And there's one that I would say, in my experience, is even more common, and that's where people mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we love our customers, or however they respond, but they don't practice it. And the reason they don't is because the existing culture is in the way. There's Peter Drucker, who was a famous management scientist, died 5 or 7 years ago. He had a famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the intention can be there. And there's organizations I work with who have that, where they really want to do this. They really want to put love to work and use what I call the ABCs: authenticity, belonging, and collaboration. The ABCs of putting love to work. They want to be that way, but they're so busy, or they have all these pressures to deliver, to meet sales goals, or whatever the goals are, they supersede and obscure the love piece. We would if we could, but we can't. We want to, but how our company works, what our culture supports isn't that.
Right.
So what actually can be dangerous is to promote this idea where there's not the culture or the skills to practice it. Brene Brown talks about a variation of that. Said the worst thing to do is tell your people, be vulnerable at work, but not teach them how. Now what do I do?
It's so true, and I'm thinking about that in like just overall like parenting to their kids or like just in general like anyone who has a leadership role in someone's life. I feel like I say that because I'm thinking as like as a man, we're taught to be a certain way, but we're not taught how to be that way. Or like I was talking to a buddy of mine, he's a dating coach, and in the conversation he said a lot of people are taught how to get someone, they're not taught how to keep them once they like have someone. So that's what I'm hearing to where it's like don't just initiate or state what it should be, give them the actual tools and resources and step by step and roadmap in order to then make it happen. So it's like, hey, if we love this thing, this is now how we're going to showcase, make it happen, and sustain this love for this thing as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in our more broadly, our culture and social construct rewards behaviors of toughness and greed. And we have the expression, well, it's business. There was a saying in The Godfather was saying to a character named Sonny, nothing personal, it's business.
Hmm.
And that was for what the mafia was doing.
Correct.
That idea carries over. I flip it. Business is personal. We are persons. How could it not be personal?
Yeah.
So you a few minutes ago used the word humanity, like remembering, like in sport, when you're on the football field, people on the other team, they're humans too, and you don't want them to get hurt. You want them to do their best, play hard, and you walk off the field together.
Right.
And similarly, where business goes off the tracks is when they forget we're dealing with human beings, not just numbers.
Yeah. I'm interested in this. Is gonna before I dive over to that, because I feel like as we start to utilize more tools and AI, there is a conversation where it's like, is that love aspect going to be not replaced, but it's going to be hindered because now you're utilizing things that are going to get rid of people, and people do hold that love, in them, that which brings it out to the culture and then to the product and to the overall service. So it's interested to see how that's going to change with AI. But before I ask questions on that, because I am interested, what would you say is probably some of the hardest out of the 8 for the Amari wave that leaders are having trouble adopting? I know you mentioned that because of this is how it's always been done, but out of those 8 specifically, which one will be the hardest for leaders to adopt?
I think a hard one, especially for companies who are at the very early stages of doing this, is to transform the whole company to align with these ideas, because that requires creating a culture that supports it and setting a tone that supports it. Most importantly, modeling the behaviors and the choices that support it. So that can be very challenging. What I recommend is taking it slow, choosing one of the, for example, 7 Amari Way principles, like respect money, or take the long view, or do the ABCs: authenticity, belong, collaboration. Let's work on showing up authentically. Take one thing, build a success, and then move on from there.
I like that. It reminds me of habit stacking. In
Yes.
a way, it's like, hey, you want to change your life, that's awesome. Don't change everything all at once. Let's just work on one component. It's like you're like a car, like you're not working on every nut and bolt the whole time. Like each time you're just focused on one particular area, making sure that it's secure and ready to go, and then eventually the whole machine will be restored, and it'll be able to drive.
Yes.
Now, with that being said, with the AI and how automation is, coming into businesses, taking over certain areas like customer service, sales, do you see potentially these tools either enhancing or harming the, like, having love per se in the business? Or is it just figuring out how do you actually keep it with these tools now?
I think the tools can dramatically enhance it. If they harm it, it's because there's not enough structure in place to support the idea of putting love to work and love powered leadership. So I do not see AI stripping it away when it's firmly in place.
Mhm.
In fact, I see AI strengthening it, because AI, generative AI, is smart enough to know that, oh, appealing to people's emotions, reaching them where they're at, being respectful works. We get better results. Employees are more engaged, they're more productive. Customers feel heard. There's a deeper sense of connection. So AI is smart enough to know that and doesn't have the problem or the capacity that humans have of, well, I know I should do this, but I'm not going to because I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
As humans, we sometimes struggle to honor our commitments, and we favor instant gratification. It's one of our challenges.
Right.
And AI, unless that's programmed in, that's not going to happen. And so that then can support a deeper and more enduring commitment to putting love to work.
And you mentioned you hit on something very key to where it's like we don't have the AI doesn't have to worry about the emotions that we typically do. And it's like, as much as you may actually want to have that love in the business with another person, whether it's in human resources, in sales, or just in general conversations with another colleague, your outside world will affect how you feel. And then it will trickle no matter what happens. And it's not intentional. Like that person didn't really trigger you, something else triggered you, and now you can't have a good enough conversation. But with the AI tools, it can keep it not neutral, but it doesn't have to worry about it being affected by outside things. It's programmed off of this core, which if you prompt the core correctly, it will always just drive from that love aspect, no matter what that person is saying. It's kind of it's
Well said.
good. It's interesting because some people I've had conversations with, they're like, yeah, but isn't that like manipulative or, you know, bad because now the person doesn't really know that this isn't necessarily a real person, so they're not connecting with the human. It's like, yes, but I don't think it's manipulative because I don't know. It's an interesting debate or conversation to say is that actually authentic? Like, is that behavior authentic to utilize an AI tool who can be this way all the time, every time for a person? But I guess it's where you using it at to then have that authentic um relate or connection with the person and what value you're bringing to them.
Yes. And that speaks to having AI as a sort of accountability partner too.
Mhm.
Like if I'm not showing up authentically, if I'm out of alignment and that shows in my words and my actions, AI can note that
Yeah.
and wave a flag and call me back.
I like that. Now, for a lot of people, right, you've given a lot of practical steps throughout the journey. What was your journey like a little bit helping people to adopt these? Like, was there ever a moment where you're like, okay, maybe I don't like this love thing, this Amari wave isn't going to work? Did you ever have that moment? Or was it like, no, 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 no. Because I'm seeing more and more companies don't have it, I now need to actually double down and make sure this happens in people's companies.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of 5 years ago or so when I was moved to write this book. In a way, it's what a friend of mine calls a choiceless choice. It very much felt like a calling to write this book, that on good days, the writing came through me. On not so good days, I was trying to control it. And I want to say it this way. And it didn't work out that well. And that's something I've practiced over the years, is tuning into that, what I'll call guidance, that I believe is available all the time to all of us. And I don't mean that in a woo-woo kind of way. I mean it in a very practical sense. And part of my work with executives is to tap into that through self-awareness, tuning in, discernment, and practices like that. So when I was writing this, there were moments, of course, when I thought, is anyone going to do this? Is anyone going to? And the answer was, it doesn't matter. This book needs to come through. Apparently, I'm the one doing it.
Yeah.
And so I keep doing it. And I've been writing actually since the pandemic, since early 2020, I've been writing a weekly article. And it's free and people can get it, sign up on my website. And I've gotten really positive feedback on it. It's meant to be very practical tips for how to put love to work on specific things like how do you deal with a world that feels like it's turning upside down and still lead in a coherent way? How do you have hard conversations? How do you get your team to unify behind you? Really basic leadership challenges like that. And every week I write that. Some weeks I know it has certain impact because of hearing back from people, some weeks not. And I'm just called, keep putting it out there, keep putting it out there. And I'm grateful to you for your invitation to share the message here with your community, your listeners, your people. Hopefully the word will spread. This is what I see as a real, truly bottom line, an antidote to suffering. If we connect, if we can see ourselves in others and have that unity and are willing to be uplifted and to let go of suffering, that's what the Buddha talked about as our ultimate challenge, and what a life we can create. That's what this is about.
That a lot. And it's interesting because I've had to reflect on that personally throughout my journey. And even currently, right now, I had a great friend of mine, does very well for himself. And when I went to Vegas this past weekend, we were talking about the business and he made me take a step back, which typically I do this for other people. But he made me take a step back and he was just like, what are you doing here? Meaning like, what's the purpose? Like, what's the driving fact? Like, what's leading you to then do this thing? And it was great because it helped me to recenter and realign of where I'm I would say driving my purpose from, which allowed me to give better results for people that I'm working with. Because it's not just like, hey, I want to help you get to this amount of revenue in your business. I'm like, that's going to be the byproduct. I'm like, no, no, no. I want the person to feel like they're going to have this kind of impact within their community or within their space or within their life, which then gets. So I was like, okay, thank you for that reminder. I need that. Let me remember to drive from there, not just even though it's attractive for other people that like, yeah, I want to make money from my business, but there's something else that you want that is a more sustaining, like it's a better fuel system and source.
Yes.
That's wow, I'm having this epiphany right now. My dad always drunk Mountain Dew all the time. But we were talking, this was when I was younger and I was trying to figure out how to really control my emotions because I feel like most men growing up, they typically don't know how to do so. They're not taught how. And he was just like, listen, you can have this car and you can put this Mountain Dew in there and the car will drive. It probably won't drive that efficiently. It will drive though. And it probably will also then mess up your engine. He said, or you could decide to put the proper fuel into the system that you can actually run for a longer journey on your ride and making sure you're taking care of the car. And basically, the premise of what he was saying is what you're pouring into yourself is going to matter. So it's like if you're looking at just always this competitive edge or competition, it will drive you, but how long will it drive you into what destination before the engine stops and it's burnt out and it crashes? Versus you take the time to put in the proper fuel, the love, the purpose, like the authenticity, the ABCs that you're mentioning, that will allow you to not just get to your journey, but help you to also bring other people onto this journey as well.
Beautiful.
You're making me reflect a lot right now. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I like it. But with that being said, we're closing out pretty soon. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you? They're like, hey, I hear what you're saying. I feel like our organization or even myself need a part of this wave. Where can they find this information for you?
There's a lot of resources on my website, and we're just
Yes.
shifting domains. But right now, it's under my name, which is hard to spell, but I will
We'll
spell
spell
it
it
out.
for you.
It's MosheEngelberg.com. It's MosheEngelberg. MosheEngelberg.com. And there's a tab for resources, and there's a lot of stuff there. If you click on the blog, you'll see 5 years of newsletters, and it's easy to subscribe there. And I encourage people to do that and share it if they're moved to with a friend or colleague. These articles have a couple, I think about 150 or so on Inc. magazine under my name, Moshe Engelberg. My book, The Amari Wave, is at all the usual online places. Amari's AMARE, Amari Wave. So those are
Nice.
some places where people get resources, and I invite people to connect with me directly. My email is Moshe, M-O-S-H-E, at Amari Leadership, A-M-A-R-E, Moshe at AmariLeadership.com.
And you do have the second book coming out. Tell me a little bit more about that. What can readers expect?
This is actually a series of books that's based on these newsletters, and the newsletters are meant to be very inspiring and practical. If I do my job right, people feel like, yeah, there's something I can do. Both those things. And so it's compiling them and repurposing them into a book that's really easy and accessible that people can read on an airplane or spend a few minutes here and there. So for example, one is about self-awareness and leading from the inside out. And especially you talked about men not growing up with a lot of skills in managing emotions or recognizing them even. And I'm so glad that you're in this space, Jay, being who you are, doing that kind of work. It's so, so needed. And last track.
No worries. It's awesome.
So one is about self-awareness, leading from the inside out. One is
Yep.
about communication, and there are several others. It'll be hopefully by the end of the year.
Nice. So keep an eye out, everyone. Listen, subscribe. Make sure you're ready for that.
Yes.
I'll hold them accountable. Be like, hey, we're ready for this.
Yes.
That's great. Now, with that being said, Our biggest thing is our company's called InfoProfit. And basically the goal is there's one piece of insight that can help you to change everything to get the system running to achieve your goals and be rewarded from it. And now we dropped a lot of different gems on this podcast for sure and got people thinking, but what's one piece of insight or question you would like to leave the guests?
Love that invitation. Let me give that a moment of thought. It is that we all have magic within us. We have this capacity, it's our natural state to love and be loved. And nowhere is that as untapped as it is in business. So my recommendation, my invitation is for people to know that, to do whatever they need to do to tap into that and lead from love. It will change everything.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show. Guys, I look forward to the next one. Please follow, connect with him. It was very easy to connect. A lot of great conversations before we even got onto the podcast. So love what he's doing. Thank you so much for being on here. Until next time, guys, catch you on the next one.
Thank you, Jay. Take care.